better than blue.
Okay, welcome back to Box Office Maniacs, and here is our new review for...
Whatever you're thinking about doing, please don't do it. Any regards.
Shh, darling. Trust me.
God's sake.
It's for the best. God, I love you.
And the thing is, you know, when I heard that Scream Factory was bringing this out, it's a pretty big movie. I mean, they usually try to get sort of the lower, you know, lower horror films on the spectrum that people don't hear about that much, like Sleepaway Camp. But Misery was a pretty big, massive hit in the day, so I'm kind of surprised that they released it.
Yeah, it kind of surprised me, too, that they would do this. I thought it might be more of a Shout Factory release rather than a Scream Factory one, but I guess because it is a sort of horror film, or it has Stephen King attached to it, that I guess it falls under Scream Factory.
Oh, it's definitely a horror movie, or at least it was a horror novel. And he changed a lot of things from the novel to the movie, making it not as horrifying as the actual novel. And I actually read this. Now, you know, being a big Stephen King fan, I still remember reading this, and I read it, I think, when I was in high school. And when I was in high school, I had to take a bi-state bus back and forth between school and the mall, where my dad would come pick me up because I didn't drive at that point, and we had moved out into Arnold. This is a big, long story. Anyway, I would read the book back and forth on a bi-state bus, and I still just had that memory of reading this and just glued to it, just glued to the pages, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so amazing. This is incredible. This is fantastic. And I personally think this was the last great classic novel by Stephen King. Yeah, he's written a lot of other good books since then, but not in the category of Salem's Lot and Carrie and Cujo and Christine and The Shining and The Stand and all of those amazing novels. This, I think, was the last of those amazing novels that he wrote.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because I read it also when I think I was in high school at the time. My parents owned a restaurant at that time, and I remember sitting in the restaurant reading it. And, of course, reading it at home before I would go to bed, I would read it. And I loved the novel. I thought the novel was fantastic. I thought it was just, I was glued to it as well. And I don't really remember it now because I haven't really read it since then. Even though I still own it, I still have it. But I haven't picked it up and read it since then. And I do remember, though, there was a lot of stuff in it that didn't go into the movie. Because there was one thing that happened in the novel that I always cringed at. Was one thing that Annie Wilkes does to Paul Sheldon in this novel is there's a part in there where he's thirsty, and she brings in, I guess she was mopping or something, and if I remember right, she was mopping and she had dirty mop water. And he was thirsty. He's like, can I get a drink? And she was upset with him or something about the book or about Misery or something. She goes, well, here, you can have this. And she grabs a glass of the dirty mop water to have him drink it. And forces him to drink it or whatever. For some reason, that always stuck with me, about her doing that. It was just, you know, but it's not in the movie.
Yeah, now that you mention that, I remember that too, and because it was just so well written. It was, I still remember the plaster and the dirt and the grit and all that stuff that he was trying to swallow because she was forcing it down his throat and stuff. But there's a lot of differences between the book and the novel. But right now, I'm going to take a look at the Scream Factory disc. I think it's pretty cool what they did here. I like the new cover.
You're talking about the slip cover that's over it?
Yeah, it looks pretty nice.
Yeah, it kind of represents Misery pretty well.
And on the inside, it actually has like the typewriter. If you can see that, it has a typewriter and it just says Misery. And I really like that picture too. But this is one of those unusual movies that actually had a great cover. They had a really good poster to start with. And I understand, you know, Scream Factory always wants to change do their own artwork because it's original and nice. But I love the original. If you can see that, it looks great. It's just a real dark, snowy night with a cabin, and that represents the movie really, really well too.
Well, even just looking at the poster here, because that's what this is from, is the original poster, and just looking at it, you can tell he's all alone and left in this house, and you don't know what got him there. You don't know why he's stuck in this house. He's just at the window at this typewriter, and it just represents that really well.
And when I went to go see this movie, I actually went with, I think, my parents, and my mom had read the book, and I was disappointed by the film, to tell you the truth. I came out because it was so different from the book, because there was, so many scenes in it that he just changed. And I'll get to the stuff in the extras of why they did it. But, and if you ever want to read the book, this is some of the spoilers. I'm going to talk about the differences between the two, so you may not want to watch this part here if you don't want to be spoiled. But again, like what you're saying about the dishwasher stuff, that was, or the dirty water, wasn't even in the movie. And she actually mutilated him in the novel. She cut parts of his body off. There was a part in there, it was his birthday, and I believe she cut his thumb off or his finger or something, and she stuck it in the middle of his birthday cake and lit it, and she comes walking out with the birthday cake, and she's like, if you're real good, you won't have to eat the special candle, and stuff like that.
Yeah, she was a lot more dark and twisted than what she was in the movie. I mean, in the movie, Kathy Bates didn't do a bad job.
You fooler. Did I do good?
You did great.
Did a good job of playing the character, but she did it based on the changes that the screenwriter or whatever had made.
Isn't that fascinating?
I thought you'd be interested.
The big scene in the film, of course, is the hammer scene. And again, they talk about it in the extras, but in the novel, she actually chopped both of his feet off with an axe. She came in there with an axe and literally cut both of his feet off, and then had a blowtorch and burned both the stumps. And then she threw him down the basement after that. And that was one of the biggest shocks, the changes to me when I went to go see it. I was waiting for it. I was waiting for that to happen. And then they did the hammer thing, and I'm like, okay, that's okay, but where's the axe? And she's even on the front of the novel, holding the axe, if you see a picture of it. And now they change it, of course, to the hammer. But yeah, that was probably the biggest change out of the whole novel, is that sequence there, where she just cut his feet off rather than breaking them.
I don't know. I liked it. I liked what they did in the movie as much as I did in the book. So I liked what they did with the film. I liked some of the change, because the movie, it's almost like it's two different things. It's the same story, but it's two different things. And you could have had it this way, or you could have had it that way. It's kind of like with cheese or without cheese.
James Caan, again, he's a good actor. He's not bad, but I don't think he was good for this role. I thought, and again, all the extra stuff I'll talk about more of this in a minute, but they had this whole list of the other actors that could have played this part, and I'm like, that would have been perfect. That would have been perfect. That would have been perfect. But nobody wanted to do it. So they stuck him in there, and he was all right, but I think they could have gotten somebody better than him to play the role too.
I didn't think he did a bad job. I thought he was all right. I thought he did a good job with it. And yeah, I do agree. I mean, some of the other people that they had in mind that they talk about, to play the part, yeah, they could have done it too. But I was perfectly fine with James Caan.
And of course, Kathy Bates was amazing. I mean, she was absolutely fantastic, and she won an Oscar, for a role in this.
Thank you for thinking of me. Anything else I can get while I'm in town? Any other crucial requirements that need satisfying? Are you sure? Because if you want, I'll bring back the whole store for you.
Of course, Rob Reiner is one that directed this as well, who did Stephen King's Stand By Me and did, a bunch of other hits back in the day. And he did a great job with it. I mean, he did a really good job directing it and everything. But I don't know, it was so different than the novel, and I still can't get over it.
I'll tell you what's the matter. I go out of my way for you. I do everything to try and make you happy.
Even watching it all these years later, I haven't seen the movie in 20 years, so I thought maybe, it still upsets me.
I feed you, I clean you, I dress you, and what thanks do I get? Well, I'll get your stupid paper, but you just better start showing me a little more appreciation around here, Mr. Man.
So, yeah, before you actually get more into the movie here, Vince got an odd DVD. He actually bought it at Walmart. Why don't you tell him the story, Vince?
And I'm walking through Walmart and I saw it on the shelf. And our Walmarts here locally, where I live, don't usually have Scream Factory anything on their shelves. So that was right there was surprising to me. It was just, wow, you know. Got home and I took it out of the case, took it out of here. I guess I could even show the disc here. Took the disc out, went and put it in right into my player and went and watched it. Well, getting into the extras, I watched one of the commentaries. I watched the first two extras, and then I got into the third one, and halfway through the third extra, it starts freezing, you know, and then it got worse and worse and worse as it went on. So I took the disc out, and I'm like, what's going on with this? Is there a scratch on it or what? And here it is. I don't know if you can see it, but
it smudges.
I can't see if it's showing. Oh, there it is. I see it now. There it is.
But mine costs the most, so I don't see how it can smudge.
Up here, you see there's a great big, like, there it is, big time, fingerprint, or something, smudge of some sort.
Oh, it does smudge after all. Isn't that fascinating?
I never touched the back of it, so I don't know where that came from. It came right out of the disc, so, or right out of here into my player. So I didn't do it, so I don't know where it came from.
Let's get to the extras, Vince.
Now for the good stuff.
Okay. These fun extras here.
So, the reason that we usually get Scream Factory DVDs is because the extras are phenomenal. I mean, they're usually so great it takes us weeks and weeks and weeks to get through them, like the Hell Night that I reviewed not too long ago.
Yeah, that took you forever.
Yeah, I mean, the extras on that were phenomenal, and there was a lot that just went on and on and on and on, and everything was just great on there. And then we get to Misery here, and it's a good word for the extras on here, Misery.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That about explains all of it.
I really value your criticism, but maybe we're being a little hasty here.
There's two commentaries, one by Rob Reiner, and the other one, I believe, is the guy who wrote the movie.
Screenwriter William Goldman.
I sat there and I was like, oh, this would be really interesting. You know, Rob Reiner. I don't think I've ever listened to a Rob Reiner commentary. I don't think I'm ever going to listen to another Rob Reiner commentary after this one. It was just horrendous. And I'm sitting there watching the movie, and there is literally 15 to 20 minute long pauses where he doesn't say anything, and all of a sudden he starts talking. I'm like, wait a minute, what? Is somebody in the house? Where'd they come from? And it's like, you know, I forgot I was watching a commentary. I was sitting there watching the movie, and all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, this scene, I'm like, wait, there's somebody here. And it's like, what? I mean, it was terrible.
Yeah, at first it's not like that. Like I'd say the first 20, 30 minutes of it, it's not like that. He's actually talking through most of it, and there's only like a few pauses, like maybe 2-3 minutes long. As it got more into the center of the film toward the end, it got worse. And you're right. It got to where there was like 10, 15 minutes of him not saying a word.
And literally, I was sitting there, and my wife came in, she's sitting there on the couch watching it. She said, what are you doing? I said, I'm watching this commentary. And the movie's playing, and it's playing, and she's like, oh yeah? And I said, just wait for it, it's coming.
Wait for it.
Yeah, here it comes. 15 minutes, he starts saying something, she's like, wow, that's terrible. I was like, I know, I've been sitting here for the last 45 minutes waiting for him to say something. So it's like, and the thing too is when he does say stuff, he describes what's on the screen, and I hate that so much. It's like Rob, I'm watching the same movie as you're watching. I don't need to have you tell me, here she comes about to open the door. Here she comes into the door. Here she's I mean, he describes the scenes on the screen, and oh, I hate that. I just hate when they do that.
I know that, Mr. Man. They also call them cereals. I'm not stupid, you know.
And the other thing that got me, though, Dave, was when that big scene happens with the hammer. You know, everybody waits for that scene, and here's all these parts where he's stopped and he's watching the film through all the smaller, you know, stuff. Now here comes the big scene, and he talked all the way through it.
But I didn't cheer. I stood right up and started shouting, "This isn't what happened last week! Have you all got amnesia? They just cheated us! This isn't fair! He didn't get out of the cock-a-doodie car!"
Yeah, it was just terrible. It's an absolutely horrendous commentary. So the next commentary was with that William Goldman guy, and I couldn't stand that guy's voice. He's like, "This is a commentary by William Goldman. I'm going to be talking about misery." It's just like, oh, I'm going to sit here through the whole movie and listen to this guy now?
See, I didn't get a chance to listen to that one yet.
It's just as bad. It's even worse, really. Again, he'll sit there and talk to me like, "Yeah, this is the part where, you know, she's going to come into the room and then she's going to walk up to him and talk to him." And I'm just like, oh my God. It's like grating listening to this guy talk. And then again, pauses, just long 15, 20-minute pauses of him not saying anything. And then he might come on, he's like, "Yeah, I wrote this a little bit differently than he wrote that, and he did this." And just like, I couldn't even make it through. I stopped it. I could not make it through.
Sound like the smoking man.
I mean, you would hope to get one good commentary out of the two, but they were both bad. Just bad.
It has no nobility. There, I said it.
So we get on to the next extra here, and that's the interview with the director, Rob Reiner. And, okay, well, I actually like this one because it was semi-entertaining. It's long, too. It's good, probably, 40 minutes, 50 minutes long?
Yeah, it's a long interview with him. I was surprised how long it was, actually.
And he actually goes into all of his other films, and that's what I liked about this. He does talk about The Princess Bride, and he talks about Stand By Me, and he talks about, you know, all these other films that he made. And it's kind of interesting to hear how he made those and why he chose to make those. But again, what was it, Vince? What did he do?
He said almost word for word exactly what's in the commentary. Almost completely word for word.
And that's a big problem here. And a lot of the commentaries do this. And that's why I really liked that Hell Night didn't have a commentary, because when you watched all the interviews, you heard all this for the first time. I mean, there was no repeating of the same stuff that you just heard. And I guess it's because a person only has so much to say about a movie. And if he says it all already through the commentary, he's going to say it all again, because you can only say so much about what you did. I mean, there isn't that much more to say about something that you already talked about.
He does talk about his other films and everything, but he spends the first, I would say the first half of that interview talking more about that and less about Misery. But when he does get to Misery, it's the same stuff. It's the same thing, word for word.
So the thing that Rob Reiner talked about here that I really liked a lot was the scene with the foot and why he chose to not use the axe. And after he explained it, I'm like, okay, now I understand it. Now I get why he didn't do it. Is because the fact that he's like, if you cut the foot off, it's such a gruesome scene, you lose the audience for the rest of the movie. They're gone. I mean, you really, that's a scene that will be stuck in their head, and they're gone for the rest of the film. And also, you just mutilated your main character, so he doesn't have a foot anymore. And he says, we couldn't do that. We couldn't make it that gross and that gruesome, because it would just lose the audience throughout the rest of the movie. And I totally understand that now. I can see the choice of doing what he did with the foot, being that he didn't cut it off, that he broke it. And it makes perfect sense to me now, I guess.
It's also, if you think about the way the movie progresses, the way the movie progresses itself, and the story, yeah, it makes more sense just to break his feet rather than to cut him off. Because if when you read the book, this is what I was saying about with the book too, is when you read the book and the way the book progresses and the way the pace of the story and everything that the book is telling, there's a lot more gruesome things that happen in the book, and it makes more sense for it to be there than it would be in the movie. So it's like watching it's the same story, but you're watching two different versions of it.
This is a point, too, where he talks about the different actors, the people that were going to be in the movie, and he mentions Richard Dreyfuss, and he mentions Harrison Ford, and Dustin Hoffman. What's the other guy? Dick Tracy guy. I can't think of his name is.
Warren Beatty.
And he mentions all these stars, and once he starts talking about it, out of all of them, I really wish that Richard Dreyfuss had been in this film, because this would have been his movie. This is a perfect movie for him. I totally could have seen him in this movie, and it makes me angry that he wasn't in it. And I mean, Harrison Ford would have been interesting, but this would have been Richard Dreyfuss' movie. I 100% could see him in this role.
I don't think I could see Harrison Ford doing this. Richard Dreyfuss, yeah, maybe. I can see Richard Dreyfuss, but not Harrison Ford.
Yeah, and the thing is, too, I guess none of these people read that book either. And he talked again about the book was never up for sale because Stephen King was like, it was his personal book, was like Stand By Me. But then when he found out Rob Reiner was doing it, he's like, okay, you can have it. And then he said that when Stephen King gives you his book, he's out. He gets the money, and then he has no involvement whatsoever in it whatsoever. None. He's just gone. And they can do whatever they want with it. And again, I find that kind of weird.
Yeah, I do too.
As somebody who's written a book, or several, I would be on the set. At least I would like to see what was happening to what I've done. But I guess he's had so many done already, he's like, whatever, go do whatever,
But I think he also felt like, okay, well, he loved what Rob Reiner did with Stand By Me, so he was like, it's in good hands, I don't have to worry about it. But at the same time, I would want to be there on the set and see what they're doing. I wouldn't just take the money and run. But I think it's kind of odd too, because then there was movies that I don't know if he did that with those films, like for instance The Shining. Stephen King has always complained about The Shining. He hated the way Stanley Kubrick had done The Shining, and he's always complained about it. So if that's what he did with each one of his films, then you don't have any reason to complain, pal. You weren't even there. If you just took the money and ran, you don't really have a say-so.
Yeah, it's true.
So the next interview is an interview with Greg Nicotero, and he was the special effects guy on the movie, the special effects supervisor, I guess it was. And he was the one, they were running K&B Effects Group at that time. And he even talks about it, that one of the films that they had just finished was like Evil Dead 2, and all the other horror films, actual horror films that he had done, and they were getting popular because of all those horror films that they had done. So then he gets a call from Rob Reiner to do this. And I guess he had a lot more gruesome effects to do in this movie, and a lot more stuff that actually went with the book. But they didn't do any of those, but the stuff that he did do in here, he actually made him gruesome enough that Rob Reiner didn't even want to show it.
Yeah, this is probably my favorite thing on here as an extras. I love this interview, and it was really great to see the behind-the-scenes stuff and show the legs and all the different types of legs that he created, and the feet, and the how, because he had to do like realistic work on this. It couldn't be like Evil Dead looking. It had to be realistic looking broken legs and broken feet, and he actually made, which I didn't even know watching the movie because it was so good. It's like towards the end of the film where he hits Kathy Bates in the head with a typewriter. That was a sculpt. That wasn't even her. Like, I had no idea because it looks so good. And when he's like shoving the paper into her mouth, once again, that wasn't her. That was a sculpt. But it was done so well, I would have never known.
And this is a credit, again, to practical effects. And that was what Greg Nicotero was especially good at. And he's still good at that. So this was 1990. And by that point, too, the practical effects were starting to be less and less. He also talking about the MPAA and how they all came down on all the violence and everything and gore and stuff in movies, and they were really big on that. So every time he would show anything graphic, they would end up cutting it out anyway.
Yeah, this was a great extra. Really, really good, and it's a brand new one, so very good. I think this is, for me, the best extra on here.
Yeah, it's one of the very few that I got to watch. So, and out of the very few I got to watch, it was, I would say it was my favorite. I like this one a lot more than the Rob Reiner one. So
up next is Misery Loves Company featurette. And this is an old one. Everybody's in it. James Caan's in it. Kathy Bates, Rob Reiner. This is where the screenwriter comes in. He talks about all the stuff. And again, it's nice to see Kathy Bates talking about the movie finally, even though it's an old interview. I wish they would have gotten her for a new one, but yeah, she talks about all how she went through and how they got her and how she was a stage actress and this was the first movie, and it was alright extra, but again, a lot of repeating of what we already heard.
Exactly. They show, especially Rob Reiner. Every time Rob Reiner's on here, he's saying the exact same thing. So unfortunately, after this is pretty much all David, because I couldn't watch the rest of it because of that smudge across my disc.
The next one is Mark Shaman's musical misery tour featurette, whatever. This is the guy who did the music for the movie. He sits there and he talks about how he came up with the music, and the guy is sort of like a pompous sort of. I just didn't like the guy. He was really full of himself. He's like, yeah, I did the music for Misery, and this is how I did it, and I wrote these B flats and the E flats and the C flats, and then I went, and it's really great to hear the whole orchestra playing at your stuff, but then you're not just. I didn't like the guy. I didn't like this interview, and it's an older interview. I don't know where they got it from.
Well, Rob Reiner actually spoke very highly about this guy, too. That was one of the things in the interview and on the commentary and on the features, that Rob Reiner kept going on and on about the soundtrack here. And I don't know, I guess the music's okay in this movie, but I've never really thought it was anything special. I never said, man, I have got to get that soundtrack, This is one of the very few movies that and I guess unless you're a huge Stephen King fan and you'll buy anything that's Stephen King and soundtracks or books or whatever, yeah, you might buy that, but or if you're a fan of that actual composer's music, maybe you'll rush right out and get it. But for me, I wasn't all that crazy about the music. I thought it went well with the movie, but it wasn't one I would rush out to go get.
Okay, now comes the terrible stuff on this Blu-ray, and I don't know what Scream Factory's thinking of when I guess they tried to find anything and everything to put on here, because I know they do that a lot, and sometimes it's really interesting because it's really weird, oddball stuff, but this is it's just stupid. I mean, there's no other way for me to say it. It's just stupid, and it's Diagnosing Annie Wilkes featurette. Just horrible. It looks like an old PBS, something that they might show in college or in school. These people sitting around thinking or talking, why is Annie Wilkes crazy, and what made her crazy, and why and it's just they're trying to diagnose what is wrong with her and why she's crazy. I don't want to see that. I mean, what do I care? It's just horrible.
Well, when you read this on the back of the disc or even on the screen, when you see Diagnosing Annie Wilkes, you think, well, they're probably going to do an interview with Kathy Bates, and they're probably going to decipher what she did in the book as opposed to what she does in the movie. That's what I would have thought it would be, but apparently it's not.
Exactly. That's exactly what they did, is they put stuff on the back of here. You're like, oh, I can't wait to see Diagnosing Annie Wilkes. That sounds great. And you sit there and watch, and you're like, what is this? And they put stuff on there to get you to buy, the disc, because if they just had 2 new things on here, you're like, oh, well, whatever. But they give you a whole freaking list of stuff, and then, 10 out of the 2 things is terrible. You're like, okay. Well, next is even worse than that. It's advice for the stalked. And this is just, oh my God, just stupid. It's, again, talking to people who are being stalked and what to do if you have a stalker. Why is that even on here? It's the same people talking, too. And it's like, why? Why is this stuff on here?
I think some of it is just, I think part of it, yes, is whatever Scream Factory can get a hold of or get it licensed for to be able to put it on the disc. So if it has anything to do with it, maybe it was on a prior DVD or a laser disc or something somewhere back in the day. Maybe they happen to get licensed for this. Oh well, we'll put that on there too, because it's archived stuff.
Well, then next is Profile of a Stalker. Again, the same idiotic people, and they do show clips of the film while they're talking, because they're using the Misery film to talk to you about how people stalk people.
Okay.
It's I can't really form words. It's stupid. It's just plain dumb. And I started watching it, and I'm like, oh my God, really? Same people talking about the same stuff? Maybe the next one will be better.
Nope.
Celebrity stalkers this time, Vince.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, people who stalk celebrities, because, well, why not? Why would we just not put that in there? Because that sounds like another great one.
There is nothing to worry about. You're gonna be just fine. I'll take good care of you. I'm your #1 fan.
Well, I guess this one would actually have a little something to do with Misery, because she has Annie Wilkes had the opportunity to have her favorite author there in her house and kept him trapped, which she's not really stalking him, she's holding him hostage.
The last great one here is Anti-Stalking Laws. Wow, just give us Stephen King, give us something, talk about the novel, talk about something here. Stephen King's neighbor would have been more interesting, talking about Stephen King. Anti-Stalking Laws. I don't care. Well, this is what happens, when you become stalked, and here are the laws saying that how you become stalked, and these are the laws you got to follow. It's just like, it's horrible.
Stephen King's neighbor. Yeah, I stalk him.
Yeah, I stalk Stephen King all the time. That would have been more interesting.
I watch him walk all the way up from the bookstore to his fence.
Go ahead and write some laws about that, buddy.
I peered over his wall one time. And I saw Stephen King out there tanning himself.
And finally, we have the trailers. And actually, the trailers weren't that bad. And last thing, because this thing's going on forever, but during the commentary and during all the interviews, Rob Reiner kept saying, well, we didn't want to show Annie Wilkes be crazy until the point that you find out that she is crazy. But they show her crazy in all the trailers, and you, going into the movie, she's crazy, and that didn't make any sense to me either, because it's like, well, this is the point where you realize she's nuts. She's nuts from the trailers.
And if you read the book.
Yeah, and they were trying to keep it a secret, and I was like, well, anyway. So, overall, the movie itself looked good. It sounded good. It's in 4K restoration on here. So, yeah, there was zero problem with that. If you're a big fan of Misery, quality-wise, it's excellent. Sound is great. All of that is great. And the movie itself, still, I enjoyed it. I don't think it's one of the classics out there. I would give the movie itself a 4 out of 5.
And yeah, I agree. It was crystal clear picture, sound was great, all of that on this. I mean, Scream Factory does what Scream Factory does with these films, and it's usually fantastic. So that's all great. But as for the movie itself, I agree with you to a point, but I actually enjoyed the movie a lot more than that. So I do believe that it's more of a classic than, or that it has become a classic since it's been out. Because I hear a lot of people talk about, whenever they talk about Stephen King films, this movie usually comes out of there. And they say, oh yeah, I saw Misery, I love that movie. And that's usually what everybody says about it. So, and I do too. I love the movie. I thought it was fantastic. So I would actually give the movie a big... So I loved it a little bit more than you did, but...
So extras here. Extras is hard to review because commentaries were terrible. It had 2 decent interviews, one really good, the other one okay, and the rest of it was just terrible. Just terrible. And it's unusual for me to say that about Scream Factory because usually Scream Factory brings it. I mean, they usually just bring it. And hopefully the future releases from Scream Factory are going to bring it because, I mean, Hell Knight brought it. Don't get me wrong, but this did not bring it. It left it somewhere. I don't know where it left it, but it's probably at like the airport or something. But extras, I'm just gonna have to give this thing a 2.5 out of 5.
And I also would give it a 2.5 out of 5, even though I only saw 3 or 4 of the extras.
Vince, that's all you need to see. You don't need to see any more.
I trust that David watched, what he watched, and I would probably, from what he's talking about here, I would probably agree with most of what he said. So, and I totally agree with him as far as like he said with Scream Factory bringing it. I mean, they usually do. And the 2 interviews, with the one with Rob Reiner and the one with Greg Nicotero, those were Scream Factory interviews. They were new interviews, and they were done well. It's just the interviews themselves, I thought one was all right, but I did like the Greg Nicotero one a lot better. And the commentary was just terrible. The one I listened to was just terrible. And most of it was terrible because not only the pauses in it, but because he says the same thing that he says in every interview and every feature.
So that's it. That's Misery. The movie was really good, but the extras, they were kind of like a misery.
Yeah, it was kind of a misery trying to, especially with the fact that I have this great big grease splatter all over the back of my disc. It was really disappointing. Outside of that, it was really disappointing for the extras.
So that's it for Box Office Maniacs and Misery and the Scream Factory review. If you liked it, make sure you hit that subscribe button so we can see all of you maniacs next time here on
Box Office Maniacs.
Good job, Vince.
Shh, darling. Trust me.
God's sake.
It's for the best.
Hey, please.
Almost done.